Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Vincent Tsay and I am a chess master. Today we will be going over some special moves in chess that you probably didn't know. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, which I strongly recommend, the link will be in the description. So now that we got that out of the way, get your notepad out and let's get this started. Checkmate. So first we will look at promotions. So let's see, let's clear the board. So before I mentioned in the previous video that pawns can only go forward and not backwards, right? So you might be asking, Vincent, what happens if the pawn reaches the back rank, right? Because it can't go any further. So you go up here, and now what happens? You see on the screen, it has queen, knight, rook, and bishop. So these are the pieces that white can promote to once your pawn reaches the back rank, right? So normally we promote to a queen because it's the strongest piece, but obviously there are exceptions. So that's why pawns are really underrated piece, because once you get to the back rank, you can promote to any piece you want. Ooh, queen, okay. So the second move I want to look at with you guys is castling. So this is a really unique move. So as you can see, the position on the board is pretty much a position, the starting position, but I took out every other piece other than the rooks and the king. So as you can guess already, the castling is between the rook and the king. So there are two types of castling. The first one is kingside castle. So this is when your king moves 2 squares to the right, and now your rook comes over. So same thing with black, 2 squares to the right, rook comes over. By the way, guys, ignore that bar on the side. It's just nothing. Okay, so that's kingside castling. And now, okay, so let's say we put this out, and then let's go back to this position. And now queenside castling is also a move. And here the king goes 2 squares to the left, and then the rook comes over. And same thing for black, 2 squares to the left, rook comes over. So the primary goal of castling is normally to get your king to safety. So it is important to note that since castling is such a special move, it can't just happen in any condition. So there are 4 conditions in which castling cannot occur. So the first one is during the course of the game, right? Like, it doesn't matter how many pawns I put up here or whatever. Let's put these pawns on, like, for the sake of being more realistic. So both the king and the rook cannot have moved from their original squares. So for example, in the game, white played something like rook g1, and then he moved back. Now you can't castle anymore. And same thing with the king. If the king moved, you can't castle anymore. But let's say both the king and the rook didn't move. Now you can kingside castle. Same thing with the queen side, by the way, and for black and white. So the second scenario in which white or black cannot castle both sides, queen side and king side, is if there are pieces in between, right? So let's say there's a knight in between the king and the rook in the starting position. Now white cannot castle king side. But once the knight moves somewhere here, then white can castle king side. Same with castling queen side. Since the knight is blocking any of these squares, white cannot castle queen side. So once the knight moves, then you can castle queen side. By the way, this also applies to black. So the third reason why when white cannot castle is when the white king is in check. So black has a bishop here, and like I said in the last video, the bishop moves diagonally, right? So right now, I will explain the concept of check later, but just know that when black is attacking white's king, then he can't escape with castling, right? Because you just can't do that. You only can either block it or move the king. And the final scenario is when, 1 second, oops. Okay, so when one of black's pieces is blocking one of the squares that white needs to castle. So in this case, the bishop is covering the f1 square. So that means white cannot castle queenside because the king has to go through the f1 square. However, white can castle queenside because there is no interruptions. So the next special move is truly special. It's called en passant. So let me give an example. So let's say white's pawn moved up to here, the e5 square, right? And this only works with consecutive files, pawns on consecutive files, right? So let's say the black just moved c5, right? Now en passant cannot work, so don't worry about that. But if black plays d5, right, here there's a really special move, en passant, where white can take, and then this pawn disappears. So it's kind of like really, really weird, I want to say. When I first learned this move, I was like, what? Because it has nothing to do with basic pawn moves. So I'm going to give another example. So white's pawn somehow gets to d5, right? And now black moves e5 here. And now, can you guys think what white could do in this position? That's right. D takes e6. And this pawn gone, right? So this only works when white's pawn is on the 5th rank and the pawn on the file next to white's pawn moves up 2 squares, and then you can perform en passant. It's the same thing with black, but let me see. So here, let's say black gets his pawn to c4, right? And white pushes here. Now black can perform en passant, right? Like I said, the consecutive file next to it. So that's pretty much en passant. It's a really weird word because it's French for passing time. I just learned that today, actually. So this en passant move does not occur very often, but when it does, it could be extremely strong and also aesthetically pleasing. So the 4th move I want to go over is check. I've mentioned this earlier in the video, but let's go over here in more detail. So a check is when black's or white's piece is threatening the opposing king, right? So here the bishop is attacking the king as black. So we will call this white is in check, right? So if white's queen, let's say, goes here, the queen is also attacking black's king. So black is in check. Okay, so for the knight, it's also the same thing. If the knight, okay, let's say, appears on f3, and since the knight moves in an L shape, right? This is better. We can say that white is in check. And there are a few ways to deal with checks. So first, you have to capture the piece, or you have to, hold on. So if this check, either you can capture the piece, you can block the check, or you can move the king. So last but not least is the most important move, checkmate. So the reason why it's so important is because it puts an immediate end to the game. So how do you perform checkmate? Well, this happens when you put your opponent's king in check, but he cannot get out of it. So in this position on the board, if black's to move, he will play queen d2, and this is checkmate, because 1, he can't capture the piece because the bishop is protecting it. 2, he can't move the piece because he can't move the king because it's blocked by his own pieces. And finally, white cannot block the check because the queen is right next to it. So if I were playing black here, I would be happy because I would be calling the tournament director and saying checkmate. So thank you guys for watching today's video. Hopefully you learned something new, and subscribe if you want to see more chess content. Also give this video a thumbs up and turn on post notifications if you want to get notified every time I post a new video. Remember to perform daily social distancing and stay safe through these unprecedented times. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!